Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. So, technically, this is going to be kind of like two separate streams. Somewhere about through the halfway point, I'm going to switch from showing you how to do badges to how to do expressions. So I definitely suggest sticking around for that because expressions are a big part of badge making. So this first one is going to be, we're going to work on this badge here, this cute little dog. I already have a sketch made because I'm really slow at sketches, so I figured I would just get a head start and do that. Let me pull up the notes. Sketch notes. Alright, so when you're sketching, I wiggle my screen around a lot. When you're sketching, you want to start off with something that clearly shows the face. Let me get my red marker. Right there. Something that clearly shows the face, because that's, you know, obviously the main part of a badge. It depends on how many badges you have or your clients, because sometimes they may want something a little bit more unique or more of just like an art piece that happens to be printed out. But more or less, you're going to want something that shows the face very clearly. Think of it like a portrait photo. You want to leave room down here for the name, or wherever you want to put the name. It can be underneath the artwork, it can be around here, it can be above it, wherever. Just make sure you leave some room to put the name. You want to keep details pretty simple. Just simple little tufts. You don't want to go too super crazy. Unless you're printing a huge badge. If you're printing like a giant one, you can add a little bit more detail. But if you're printing the standard 6-inch, 7-inch badge, you won't need too much detail. Try to keep it about square in terms of size. Because I run into this problem with rabbits a lot, because you want those big bunny ears. You want those big bunny ears, but then, you know, the badge is only 6 inches. The head is this big. So try to keep it more or less square if you can. Sketch. No, stay down. So for this one, it's pretty clean. I left a little bit of construction lines on it, but yep, that's a sketch. So we're going to use that. We're going to start with that. Pull the notes off, and we will start lining. Line notes. There we go. Organize my friggin' layers. There we go. Alrighty. So, everything back the way it's supposed to be. There we go. So when you're lining, I usually use either a pen, like just a regular straight pen. You can also use a pencil. Wrong one. Also use a pencil like this. It has a little bit of a pressure opacity in the beginning. It's a little bit better. When you're using this, it looks a little more static and like a comic. I guess it depends on your style. But you want to keep your lines thick enough to show up after you print it, but not so thick that you're sacrificing detail. So I usually keep mine at around like a 5 or a 4, depending. Back up here. Yeah, not too thick, not too thin. It depends mostly on style. I like to fill in my lips. Sometimes I do all black, sometimes I'll leave it open and do color. But that. Trying to decide on line thickness here. 4.5. 4.5 looks about like what I would normally use. And for hair specifically, if you're doing a lot of hair or a lot of fluff, you don't want to add too much detail because we're going to add a lot of that later on. As it says right here. Because it can be tempting to want to put in all of this little detail like that. But you're going to end up going over it and shading it, and it's going to look a little chaotic if you do too much of that. So I like to leave it plain. You'll only really need a little bit of the edge detail. for fluff and stuff. I love lining hair. It's one of my favorite parts. I have this habit of lining like half of it in one thickness and then having to undo the other half because I don't like how thick it was. That's too thick. Oops, that's too thick, I think. So I'm going to redo this part. Thinner lines. Make sure you keep your lines clean, especially if you have thicker lines. The thinner the lines, the more you can get away with if you have little hangnails here and there. So thicker lines, you gotta make sure they're pretty clean, otherwise the flaws will show up. For the most part, I go in and I line the whole thing in one thickness, and then I'll go back in with a bigger pen. And I'll line the lips if I'm filling them in, and I'll line the jowls. We'll get to that in a second and do the lip real quick. Always want to have some thicker lines, whether it's black or you leave them open to color. But you always want to have some thicker lines around the eyes to help them pop and to separate them from the rest of the line art. Otherwise, they kind of, regardless of the size, they'll look kind of beady and they'll lack that expressiveness. I usually do the pupil thinner. Oops, I keep picking up that wrong brush. There we go. I usually do the pupil a good bit thinner than everything else because I like the pupil to more or less blend in after I color it. Can't get this one right. Or can't get this one round enough. Half the time this is what I do when I'm trying to draw a commission. Half of the work that you're paying for is just me trying to get the pupil round. There we go. And for teeth, if you struggle with teeth, I don't know where I read it or who I learned it from, but I read somewhere that basically the intimidation factor or like the creepiness factor when it comes to teeth is determined a lot by how round they are and how thick your lines are, especially for human teeth. If you're doing human teeth and your lines are really thick, you're gonna have one creepy looking guy. But if you're doing thinner, kind of knocks back that creepy factor. I think it was in a book somewhere. I don't remember. And for small detail lines like this one on the nose, I usually make my lines a good bit thinner. That's just like a color keeper line. It doesn't even really have to be there. Make sure you take your sketch on and off a couple times. Make sure you're doing it right. Everything looks good. Okay. trying to keep from flipping it around too much so you can at least read some of the words. But I do flip my canvas an awful lot. It's just how I keep things even by constantly flipping it. I think I'm about to do it again so I can get this line. I used to take so long at lining things, and now I am so much faster at it, and I'm so grateful for that. So it used to take me, God, 3 hours or more to finish a badge, which is a long time for a badge. For me, at least. Once you know where your tools are and how much pressure you need for certain lines, it gets a lot easier. Cover that one. We've gone over all those notes. I'll take those off for now. One thing that I used to do, that's kind of up to style, is I used to add little, like, hair indicators. I do sometimes still do that in sketches. Just to break up any areas that are, like, you know, too broad or too, you know, if there's fluff over here, like, let's say there was, like, you know, fluff over here, and her cheek went up to here. Rather than having a definite line here where it goes from cheek to fluff, I would have, like, little lines like that. But I find that they're really hard to shade over. They're not very easy to blend in, and half the time I ended up just erasing them entirely or coloring them to the point where you could not see them. So I've been just leaving them off. And that kind of a similar situation with this. It looks good in line art, but then you go to shade it and, you know, it just gets in the way of everything because you're already going to put texture in the shading, so you don't really need those lines there to get in your way. Another thing to keep in mind with the size of the lines that you're choosing when you're lining your badge is how big the badge is going to be when you print it. If it's going to be really small, then you're going to want thicker lines. Otherwise, those lines are just going to completely disappear on a smaller 4 or 5 inch badge. Especially if you color them. If you're leaving them black, they'll be more visible, but I like to color mine, so that's why I've been having them be thicker. And it's easier to draw with thicker lines anyway, so it's a win-win. Okay. I think that's about it. So we have our lines in here. And the next thing that we need to do is to fill it in. This is pretty basic art stuff. This goes for any artwork, really, not just badges. But what I do is I fill everything in with blue, like this. I have a lot of people ask whenever I stream, why are you coloring everything blue? I'll even have people message me and be like, why? Wait, he's not blue. Why are you coloring him blue? It's the fill stage. And I was confused too because I saw artists doing it on YouTube using blue to fill in their artwork. And I was like, why in the world are they using blue? It just seems like such a random color to use to do anything. Like, why not use red or something else? Some artists do use red, I guess, but blue it's completely saturated. It's bright enough so you can see it show up on either side of a line, and it's also dark enough so you can see it show up, or rather, dark enough so that you could see white if it was left between the black line and your blue that you're filling. So it's just a really good color to use for filling. You can also use red, I guess, but I find that red I tend to miss more spots with, or purple. But blue just seems like the best bet. The way that I do it is I go over the whole thing and color the whole thing in. Just edge to edge. I don't worry about any details yet. And then once I get all that colored in, I will... See, on my program, it's called Protect Alpha. Can you... I'm asking my boyfriend a question. Take your headphones off. What is Protect Alpha called on like other art programs. Clipping mask? Lock. Yeah, it's be called lock. You just lock it.
Lock a layer.
Yeah, because a lot of times people are like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Because I use Metabang Paint Pro, and it's got different terminology than other art programs. But yeah, you would lock the layer and turn it white, and then you go over it again and fill in all your little details again in blue, so that it's easier for you to color later on. I have a question in chat. What is the question?
Is there a manual way you can make it that?
A manual way, like a traditional badge? Ask them what they mean, and I'll try to be more specific. Are they asking for like the physical production or traditionally making it? It's not the same thing as a mask. A clipping mask is where I can put this on the same layer, and it won't go over the edge. See what I mean? And that's on that same layer as the blue. If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense.
You lock and unlock the layer.
Lock and unlock it? Okay, yeah. Unlock it. This is unlocked. It just goes over. It's all on one layer. And this is locked. It stays on where I've already colored. It's hard to explain, because I only know the one program. Well, I only know this one program. Sorry if I'm, like, confusing people, because I don't know if they can hear you or not, but,
I can hear myself.
okay. Yeah, I only use the one program, so I'll be like, oh yeah, use clipping, use Protect Alpha, whatever, and everyone's like, I don't know what any of that means.
Dear artist, what program are you using?
I use Metabang Paint Pro. It's a free program, it gets the job done. Alright, I'm gonna...
Yes, they're asking, like, what is the manual way?
So traditional badges.
Yeah.
I used to do those. I used to do those a lot before I got my digital tablet. The way that I did it, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the way that I did it, the safest way that I found was to have a piece of paper, and you sketch on it, make your drawing on it, whatever, and the way that I did it, I had like a makeshift light table. I don't remember how did I do that? I had like a piece of plastic or something that I would put like a light or my phone flashlight underneath to transfer things from paper to paper. And I would then, take my sketch, my original sketch, put it underneath another piece of paper, and trace the line art onto a new, fresh piece of paper, so that there was no, deep sketch grooves or, old sketch lines that I had erased, and it was a nice, clean, fresh piece of paper. And that also saves your butt in the long run. If it messes up in the printing process, you do not have to sketch it all over again. Because you still have that original sketch. You just need to transfer your line art. And then, with that new piece of paper that you have lined onto, that can be, your color. And you can also transfer, you can do, a couple copies of the line art. That way you don't have to redo your line art. It's just a lot easier than, doing it all on one piece of paper, and then the printer, well, the printer wouldn't mess up. The laminator eats it, or, it gets messed up in shipping or something like that. And then you would cut it out of the paper. Try to use thick paper, like artist paper or cardstock for printing. I keep thinking printing. I keep going back to printing. It's a traditional badge. Use cardstock to draw on, or like a nice artist paper. And that way it'll be a little thicker than a flimsy regular printer paper. How many times can I say printer? And then you run it through a laminator, and then you got a badge. It's pretty simple. It's just like a laminated drawing. You can glue it to what are they called? Scrapbook paper, if you want like a pretty edge, and you don't want to have to like draw it and run the risk of messing that up. But yeah, it's basically just, instead of drawing it digitally, you just draw it on paper, and then you laminate it. You can also scan it through, once again, for a printer. That way you have a picture of it on your computer, so just in case something happens to it, you at least could just print it off. It wouldn't be the original, but that's, part of the gamble with traditional art, is sometimes it gets messed up. Yeah, I did that a lot. I did a lot of those. I have some of those scanned on my laptop, actually. I was looking at them today. So yeah, finished filling it in. Coloring it in now. This character is pretty easy, so this shouldn't take too long. Yes, the white nose, that's what I want. I should have set this to capture the ref sheet. That would have been useful. It's something I like to do. It's just a style thing. Is I like to make the nose darker on the bottom or lighter on the top, depending on the color. Just for some added depth. Blue's clues? Yeah, a little bit. Have a look close. I like to do like a gradient on the eyes. I don't always do that, but I used to do a lot of gradients on the eyes too. Color notes. I do not have color notes. You get no notes for colors. You just color it, and that's it. I don't have a whole lot to say in the coloring phase. Just color it. If you have any other questions, drop them in the comments and my boyfriend will read them to me and I can answer them. Because I am not watching the chat right now, unfortunately.
I am on chat.
Yeah, Eli is watching the chat. Probably other people at FWA, but no one talks about them.
So far I've gotten mostly comments about how cute it is. And then it's looking super awesome and it's looking good.
Awesome. I always struggle with grading.
Will you be doing anything on highlighting or shading?
I will. Excuse me, I just almost sneezed. Yeah, I will be. I'm doing a basic cell shade for this one, but I will also be pulling up some older examples of, like closer to a full shade and like a painted type deal. This is only a 1 hour stream and I'm already about halfway through it, so I gotta get trucking, but I will cover cell shading, and some simple highlights, basic highlights, and then show some examples. And then after this hour is over, once it hits 11 o'clock, I'm going to swap over to expressions and teach you guys how to do expressions. Later. I should have drawn this character's collar. That wasn't cute. I was ill-prepared. I actually wasn't. I just wasn't thinking. I had ample time to be prepared. I had like 4 days. I know, I'm not even reading my notes. It's fine. I wing it. It's fine. Everything's fine. If you see my pen like poking around on the side, it's because I'm touching a ref that you guys can't actually see. I hope some people from my chat are watching. After I told them very firmly that they had to watch my stream. I should have had color notes. Why don't I have color notes? Silly me. I do have notes on color, but I have to think of them off the top of my head. So, when you are printing, specifically a digital badge, or really anything, I guess, but specifically for at-home printers, especially for those, you really want to make sure that your colors are not too dark. This usually means for colors that are neon. My printer absolutely hates cyan. It hates it. It hates cyan. It hates lime green. And it does grays different, or they're all going to come out the same. just really push the values, I guess, on grays. And in terms of, let me pull up another thing here. In terms of, I have so many layers that I don't know what they are. In terms of like cyan and neons, depending on your printer, you have to kind of know your printer. But if you wanted a color that looks like this, okay? My printer hates this color, okay? It hates that color. It will not print that color. So if you want something to print and look remotely like this, you need to really have a color that looks more like that. And my printer will more or less translate, you know, this color into this color. Similar thing with cyan. Or not cyan, that was cyan. Lime green. Like this. It comes out looking hunter green. I don't know why, it just does. Doesn't like lime green. Saturated colors. Or pastels, too. It'll do the same thing with pastels. It doesn't really like yeah, I'll do that. If you have a color that's like a light pink and you want it to actually look pastel, you're going to want to go like, you know, a couple times lighter than you would think. You can always print a color swatch. I did that a couple of times. If you have a character you're really not sure with, if the color is going to come out, you can just like shrink down the color palette to like a small size and run it through your printer and see how the colors come out, and you can adjust accordingly. And then what were you saying, Eli, about printer quality? Like the best quality printer you could...
Oh yeah, if you're getting like a run-of-the-mill printer at...
Can they hear you?
I believe so.
Okay. Just want to make sure they can actually hear you.
If you have a run-of-the-mill printer at a department store, you're going to be getting that kind of quality. But if this is something that you are looking to really invest in, then go out there and do yourself the personal investment of getting a good printer.
Yeah, right now we have an inkjet 38 something. It's like an HP. It's like a nicer.
It does pretty well.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's
It is a little limited on what colors it likes and doesn't like.
Yeah, they're all gonna be kind of finicky. It does the same thing that my mom's did when I was still doing work there, where it just does not like neons and it does not like pastels.
You have a big question coming in too.
Okay. What question do you have, Treason?
Well, we're waiting on it right now.
Okay. Waiting on a question from Treasoner. I really thought this character had more markings. I'm not complaining, it's still adorable, but I really thought it had more markings than this.
Oh, I got the freckles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went too simple, but that's okay. Oh.
It's still very...
Yeah, it's adorable. I love this character. I'm regretting not putting the collar on. I think it would have been cute with the collar. Collars are nice because you don't have to have this, like, chopped off neck. It kind of gives you, like, an easy... I keep gesturing with my hands as if they can see what I'm doing. It gives you, like, this nice cut-off area instead of having just a slabbed-off neck. Freckle time.
Yeah, accessories are your friends when it comes to bags. I wish I had a wonderful comment. Amazing how it's 2020 and we still can't get printers to work properly.
Yeah.
Color calibration issues, inkjet cartridges versus laser jet toner cartridges. That's such a problem. Why can't we just take the colors that are on the internet and make them real life? Okay, so the question from Treasoner is, the question is the fact I'm way too much detail-oriented that I focus on too much on a single part. I got an example from the stream I can use as an example and advice to prevent too much focus on a singular part. An example, singular layer of teeth and forget the layers exist. Any advice to see the layers?
Like you just have too many layers?
I think, yeah, I would combine your layers?
Yeah, if you're struggling to keep track of your layers, or if you just get too focused on a certain part and you just can't really, I guess, just can't organize your layers.
You can label your layers.
You can first of all label your layers. I'm sitting here with folders full of layers of stuff to teach you guys about, and all kinds of other stuff, and every single one of them has a name. Every folder has a name, everything in the folder has a name. If I make a new one, then it has a name. I name everything. If you're having a hard time focusing on a certain spot, your best bet is going to be to just step away from that area and work somewhere else, and slowly let the piece come together as one thing and not finish one area at a time. Otherwise, you're never going to know when you're satisfied with that one particular area. You're just going to keep kind of running it into the ground until you have these perfectly painted little teeth and your nose is still flat colored. And now you feel like you have to match. I have a perfect example of a badge that I did. Let me look at Vishy's badge.
Oh, yeah.
The one that I was like, ooh, hair! I was like, yay, hair! Hair is fun, cool hair. Crap, I have to color and shade and highlight all of this hair. I don't want to do that. It's beautiful, though. I'm very happy with how this came out. But, oh my god, all that hair. I just got really carried away with the hair. It's so pretty. It goes over the horn. It's just so nice. But yeah, that's kind of what happened with this one. It did come out really nicely, though. Sure.
So, this badge is absolutely beautiful. The composition is really, really nice. But you end up losing some of these details when you put so much focus and emphasis on the hair. You lose the details of like how beautiful these lines are around the horn.
Yeah, that's also got to do with shading, though, because
Yeah.
my shading wasn't pushed enough in that. Which is funny, because I really tried to push the shading. But it kind of has a golden glow about it, so I guess it works. Those flowers. Those flowers. Took me so long. They took me so long. Alright, back to this. I had, like, the rest of the badge done, and it just turned into flower time for a couple of weeks. Finish the markings on this and get to shading. We got 25 minutes? Something like that? 25 minutes. Which should be plenty of time for me to cell shade, but, you know, that's... We'll find out here in a minute. Alright. Methinks, except for this ear, is done. Alright. Quick go over, make sure it looks good. Okay. Yep, that's character. Alright. So, now what I'm going to do, now that I have my colors done, is I'm going to pop another clipping mask? Yeah. It's just called clipping on my program, but it's a clipping mask. Yeah. Pop another clipping mask onto that fill that we did of the whole character. And we're going to pick a color. This color theory, and I don't know how to explain it. It's a little bit warmer, I guess, than the main color of your character. It's going to be like a pastel color. I'll show you in a second. Set it to multiply. I believe multiply is the same on this program. Yeah, multiply. And then take a little bit of it off in some areas so you can compare it. So I'm going to go a little bit more purple, and then I will show you the color that I ended up with. You want to keep it, it's going to be like a grayish pastel. I go for the more saturated colors for shading. Some people prefer more of a gray. I like it to have more color. And you can always change this later if you do it the way that I do it. Because rather than shading with a color and white, I shade with a color and an eraser. So I can just change this. And there's also a hue filter, so you can change the color of your shading at any point. So we'll start with something that's kind of like this, that shows you... Fill all that back up. That shows you a good contrast between what is shaded and what is not. And you don't have to do this step, but I like to do it just because it keeps me on track. Is I go in, keep it full screen for you guys. I go in and just take off where I think the light is hitting the character. Top the nose, and this, I will point out that this color is not dark enough on the dark blue area, so I'll have to change that later. You can see when I go to erase it, it doesn't show much of a difference as it does on, like, the white. Just take off where the sun would be hitting it, etc., etc. So you can get an idea of where you need to shade and how much. This is where I start getting excited, because I can start doing textures, because it's been really flat and boring up until this point. Alright. So, just take a mental picture of your crappy little scribble there, because you know where the light is hitting it. And then you fill it all back in. It was never there. No one will ever know. Okay. Now the real shading begins. I always start with the eye. That's just a me thing. I don't know why. I always do it. I always draw the eye first. I'm one of those people. I'm gonna leave the nose alone for now, because I'm not gonna be able to see it anyway. What I think of shading as is kind of like carving. You're carving away the areas that the light is hitting. So think of like your pen as like a spoon or a carving tool. You are whittling away, scraping away the shadow. And it's going to be rough at first. It's basically a second draft. If you're confident enough, you can just go right in for the first draft, or for the, rather, final draft. But I know from experience that I can't do that. I usually do a backlit kind of situation. There's no right or wrong way to do lighting. If you're going for something more dramatic, you can do, like, you know, underlighting. I did one underlit one that I did not save, so I can't use that as an example, but it was really pretty. It was a deer.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, it was Phelan or something? I don't know. Really pretty underlit one. I've done lots of overlit ones, some of them that were like glowy, really pretty. Just have fun with it. And since it's a badge, no one's really going to hound you about, oh, it's not where the light source is. It's a badge. No one cares where the light source is when it's a badge. No one knows you're bad at art when you only do badges. This is the part where I do this for 30 minutes and then that's it. But it'll get interesting in a minute once I start talking about color and texture. I'm just trying to get everything blocked in. Just bear with me. I like to do, hair is so fun. I used to struggle with hair so much. Oh, that is the wrong color. Here we go. But with hair and fur are different when you shade them. Time for another side lesson. Slap another layer on here. So, this is fur, right? This is hair. Okay. Sloppily fill this in. Get some red. Bet you weren't expecting that. Yep, that's colors. Alright. So, fur, hair. My pen is too big. You get it. Alright. So we got our shading, and our color, and our lines, etc. So when you're shading fur, I'll zoom in here for you guys. When you're shading fur, you want to have, you know, obviously your source of light, we'll say it's coming down, and then add like little smaller tufts. And then what I do is I go in and I do this to a couple of them. You can also do this as feathers. This, honestly, this particular shading style that I just did just now looks a little bit more like how I would do feathers than I would do hair. The only difference that I would do to make it look more like fur is to make it more pointed and maybe have like longer strands mixed in so that you have more of that longer texture. You can add more detail, less detail, whatever you want to do. And with hair, longer strokes. That's really the main difference. Just have longer, you can use a fatter pen. Go back in like this. Yeah. And that really is the difference between hair and fur. It's just the length of your strokes. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. There we go. Any more questions in chat?
We're currently discussing how hair is hard to do.
Hair's
That is
tricky.
its own lesson on itself.
Yeah, that is correct. I could
And
sit here for hours and talk about how to draw hair.
I was giving some terminology to the shading technique that you're using.
Yeah, I didn't go to college. I don't know stuff.
It's okay. I
don't know
barely went to
things.
college, but it's just you're using a subtraction technique because you filled the layer,
Yeah.
and then you're carving out of it, erasing out of it.
You could do it reverse too. You could just color. I used to do it that way. I used to fill in the color rather than take out the color.
Ooh, we have a question.
What is the question? I like questions.
Kinetic Burn, or Kinetic_Burn says, sorry if you covered this before, because I just pulled up the screen. But what drawing tablet do you use? My
drawing tablet, I got very lucky, and my generous parents purchased me this tablet. It is by no means a beginner's tablet, but it is a Cintiq 13 HD. It's very good, very quality. I own two. I purchased it back up from a friend of mine who was very generous. If you wanted to get one to start with, not that you're asking, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you wanted to get one to start with, I would definitely recommend, what brand is yours, babe? Hawaiian?
Hawaiian.
Yeah, looking into a Hawaiian, which is Huion, and they have screen tablets that are considerably cheaper. They're a little bit different looking aesthetically, but they essentially work the same way. You can get more screen for less price. It's just a little bit of a better idea to start with a cheaper one than it is to start with the Cintiqs. Because one of these, I'm on a 13-inch screen. This thing costs $800. This one's a 13. The whole thing is like more like not over, but the whole thing is bigger than 13. But like my actual workable screen is 13 inches.
Yeah, you know the
Trying to figure out lights here. I'm trying not to rotate the screen too much so I don't make everybody nauseous, but you don't have to have the spins for a bit so I can get this done. Yeah. I've had people complain, you twist your screen around too much. I'm like, oh, sorry. I can't help it. There we go. That looks much better. Okay. That's what I was doing wrong. You gotta know when to connect your highlights. A lot of shading. People ask, how do I do shading? How do I do this? And, people can teach you, people can tell you what they do, but a lot of it is just, you'll hear it 1,000 times. It's just practice. You just gotta play with it and know what you think looks right, what you think looks good. I spend a lot of time shading things, commissions that look almost exactly the same. So I get a lot of experience on cel-shaded smiling characters at a 3/4 angle. So I can do it fairly quickly. I guess that looks fine. That's pretty simple. This is simplified shading, I will say. Normally I put a little more detail. Yeah, I'm also speeding along here. I want to get it done so I can cover, etc. Got 15 minutes, gotta go. Alright. I should have done this as an extra layer. I did all the other stuff as an extra layer. Or, ahead of time, rather. I didn't do the hardest part, because I'm smart. Yeah, just keep in mind your light source, etc. You know what this badge kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of the one that I made of Snowshoe. It's like the same colors. Big fluffy ears. I haven't done it yet, but I do sometimes do the feathering thing on the edge of the shading to add texture. That's what I'll try to do for these ears here. Can't decide. Yeah, there we go. Okay. That's better. Hello, Fran. We've been expecting you. I'll talk more when I get this shading done. It's kind of just same old with this. If I do something interesting, I'll talk about it. Do the roar. How? Alright. Okay. Another thing that I do, for texturing, I'll do kind of similar to the technique I showed earlier, but I'll do like this in the middle of an uncolored area. Hollow out the center to look like fluff. You can make it pointed a little bit more. It look like fluff like that. Again, very simplified, but you get the idea. Yes. Very soft ears. And one thing that I had to it took me a long time to kind of get myself to learn this, despite being aware of it the whole time, is don't be afraid to shade underneath things, like leaving large blocks of shading. That's okay. Like, I'm basically done with this. I always struggle in this area, because I feel like, oh, that's too much shading, I need to take some of this down. But then I'm like, but what do I do here? I basically have to unshade the whole thing. That actually looks pretty good, so I'm going to actually go with that. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on the character, and yeah.
Because if they're like a very sculpted face and they have a lot of definition to it, then by all means leave that chunk in there.
Yeah.
But if they're like soft and round, it makes more sense to like soften the shape.
Alright, we're almost there. Almost there. Then I'll talk about font and stuff. God, 2 hours seems like such a long time until you're actually doing the thing. It's like panels. Oh yeah, an hour and a half, that's plenty of time. And then questions happen.
That's all we're doing is questions from the team.
Yeah, I like questions. Questions are fun. The nose, that's what I gotta do. Alright. Side note, as I am shading this nose, you'll notice that sometimes your shading won't show up as well on like darker colored areas or areas of like, a certain color, like maybe your purple shading doesn't show up the best on your purple areas. That's normal. That's got to do with, color science and whatever that stuff is that I never learned in college. So you just want to change the color of your shading. And I'll show you that in a second once I stop struggling with this nose. Good enough. Okay, so. Is it warmer? I believe it's warmer. Yeah. You want to go warmer on blues. So you want to shade. I'm going to just do this real quick. You know what? Let's say we have a blue. That's a cool color. We have a green.
Fran is asking a very important question.
What is your question, Fran?
What's the name of the character?
Val Smith? I think?
A furry with a last name?
Yeah, very rare. It's an alien Cocker Spaniel. I saw the words Cocker Spaniel and I was sold. Alright. So take me seconds once I get to start. Alright, we have nice colors. These are colors. You can see that. Alright. So with blue, I am going to shade blue with purple. Oh, in a minute. Let me finish doing my stuff. Got a backseat artist. My stream. Alright, there we go. You want to shade green with blue. Go with blue as you want to go. That's kind of what I'm going for. And the colors that I'm putting above these dots are the colors I use to shade. Yellow is pretty easy because you basically just go a little bit more orange and then boom, there you go. Same thing with your orange, you just go toward red. You're basically just going a hair warmer on everything. Excuse me. Just go a hair warmer. And then with pink, you shade it with purple. You just go in, you're going counterclockwise on the color wheel. Purple. And depending on your lighting and whatever other factors that might contribute, glow and whatnot, that's more look what the colors that you'd use to shade, these little dots that you would use. And, it's flexible depending on your style and what you think looks best. So you can see on the white parts, this is the color right here that I'm using to shade. And that's very similar to this color because this character is blue. So, makes sense. Alright. We're gonna call this shading done for now. I've already fixed the shading color on the nose. We're gonna do a little bit of highlight, but I can't spend too much time on it. So, I'm gonna pick more of a pinkish color. Well, I'll just color pick this one in here. I'm taking a little bit of this color right here. And I'm setting a layer to add. Don't know what that's called on other art programs. This is the wrong pen. There we go. And it's basically the one that makes stuff look like it's glowing. Whichever layer setting that is for you guys. Going around doing the surface. You can also do more so on the top. It's basically just adding another layer of shading. Leave this on, leave this off. I could play with it all day if I wanted to, but I'll try not to. This is all just a matter of preference, more or less. Adding your highlights and stuff. I used to go around and do highlights on all of these areas. And it does look a little bit nicer if you do that. That's a little bit of a pop. But it's also time consuming. So, yeah. Well, it just runs into itself, so if I need to go over, it's fine. But I do want to talk about expressions with everybody. That requires actual drawing and not just coloring. So, shaded, a little bit of highlight. Not the cleanest, but it's fine. We're going to color our lines really quick. Since this is pressed for time, I'm going to just pick a dark blue color and go over... I'm just going to go over the whole thing, I guess. And then for the areas that are this color, like the color of the ears, pick that color up, go a little bit warmer, a little bit darker, and that's going to be the color of our lines in those areas. I didn't shade the teeth. Everyone pretend not to notice that I didn't shade the teeth. Yeah, if you're coloring lines, a lot of people ask like how to know what color to pick to shade lines, or color lines rather. You just pick up the color that is basically the color of the thing that you're coloring lines for, and then make it a little bit darker, a little bit warmer, and there you go. Gradients are the bane of my existence when it comes to coloring lines, though, I will say that. Airbrush is helpful if you're lazy. I am lazy. There we go. And that just kind of takes the edge off of it, makes it blend a little bit nicer, look a little bit cleaner. This looks wrong. How do I fix that? There you go. I'm going to take a layer and pop a white highlight right there. And smaller one there, or not. Here. Maybe not. Change one on. Alright. So we got our badge. Not bad, considering it took me like only an hour to do it. A couple lights here so I don't get confused. Alright, check my notes. Sketch notes, line notes. Alright, text is next. So, this character's name is Val. I'm gonna type Val in my text thing. Not all programs have text. Mine does have text. But, I think it's all in Korean or something. I think it's Korean. But, some of it you do get a preview for it, so you can see, like, what kind of text. So when you're picking a font for a badge, you want to make sure that it's the right size, it's not too big, doesn't outweigh the character. You want to make sure that it complements the character. So this one, talk about this one for a second. This one's a little too angular for the roundness of the character, I think. It's still cute, but it's not perfect. I'd like something rounder. This one's a little bit small in the eyes, I think. Something like that. Too angular. So, totally didn't think ahead and drew myself my own text that's nice and round and perfect looking. So, I color my text. Usually, we're just going to go with blue. We're going to do like a monochrome thing with this. Usually go with blue. Do a lot of blue. Could also do a gradient. I like that. I think that looks cool. And then if you want to be fancy, sparkles. That's not sparkles. Oh, that's too many sparkles. There's a long sparkle brush. Where is all of my things? I have a new computer, so all of my stuff is like still not completely organized the way that I want it to be. There we go. Sparkles. Alright. So that's text. I chose this text because it's nice and round. The character's nice and round. It's not too detailed. The character's not too detailed. It just fits it. I do have it overlapping. I don't always have it overlapping. Sometimes I have it like underneath the character. But for this one, it would look a little odd just kind of hanging down here, so I went ahead and overlapped it. So it doesn't blend in with the character. You can see I put this white overlay, or white outline around it, just so it pops out from the artwork itself. I do have notes on text. Where are they? Yeah. Make sure it doesn't cover too much of the art, otherwise, you know, you just worked on all that for nothing. The font style complements the character, and it's large and easy to see. So there's a couple of fonts on my program that is just, it's very small and scripty, and it's very hard to read. You'd have to make it huge to be able to see it, and then it would overpower the character. So there's not a whole lot of pre-made fonts that are both fun and interesting and work, so a lot of times you might have to make your own fonts, but it's good to practice. Once you get practice on it, it becomes a lot easier. I used to hate doing fonts and writing and lettering. I just didn't like it, but I've been getting better at it. So that is that on the text. And then we have outline. So now we're getting back into like the actual badge-related things. For outlines, we have this darker one, and we have this lighter one. You don't always have to have this lighter one, but I would suggest that you do. It helps the character stay separated from this darker background, this darker edge, because we're going to add color to that edge. I'll show you an example of a badge that I did that really needed that white outline. Where is my... This is Brian. He's got a lot going on. He's got a lot of colors, a lot of textures, and I went with a brain texture for the edge around him. I don't normally do textures like that for that, but I really wanted to do brain for this one. But having it just as a brain with him directly on top of it, it looked muddy, it looked too chaotic, you couldn't directly see, you know, where the character started in the background, you know, just didn't work. So he has that white outline to help keep everything lifted up off of the background, if that makes sense. So that's why I would recommend having that. Now, for this background, this black background, the edge, rather, I have a bias toward red and blue together. It's probably going to look like butt, but we'll see. It's not too bad. We're going to stick with blue, though. Just all blue everything. Play with your colors. Purple? Ooh, purple looks nice. Purple actually looks good.
Oh, I like that.
You like the purple? Yeah.
Yeah.
Try to find the right one. Try to find one that doesn't make him blend into it. Her, him. Is that pronoun? He. There's a he. I like that. I think that looks pretty cool. And normally I would put like the sparkles on the outside here, but since I did that on the text, I would probably just leave this as is, honestly. And yeah, that's a badge right there. Let me pull up a couple of other examples, just so you can compare them. There it is. Alright, so I mentioned bunnies earlier, and how their long ears are kind of complicated. This is Bailey. I don't have Bailey's actual ref sheet, but their ears go down to the floor. They're huge. So this one was pretty challenging to try to figure out how this would work. Usually, as I pointed out in the beginning of the stream, we try to keep it square, try to keep it the same on each side so it prints more or less the same, and you don't have like the super long, weird badge that's going to fold really easy. So I try to keep it a little bit wider in the middle, just for the sake of, what's the word? Stability? Not stability. I don't know. There's a word I'm thinking of. Yeah, structural integrity. That's close enough. Just so it's not too fragile. You can see some of my shading techniques here. Also, these examples are microwaved, and I'm sad, because I thought I saved them right, but they're still they're still pixely. I don't know. Okay, good. This is just going to become art show time really soon, but I'll try to not do that. Other badges.
When you have a long badge and your client gets a really long thin badge and they go to places wearing it, it's a lot easier for that badge to get messed up, like bent in half or something.
Yeah, it's a lot
that
more.
Does not get fixed easily.
Yeah, it's a lot more prone to folding, snagging, ripping.
It's less
falling
about,
off.
The artistic integrity of it. It's more about
Yeah,
the
they can look
physical
cool.
Product.
Yeah, they can look cool, but they just wearability isn't the best. Yeah, this one's one of my favorites. I love the colors on this one. Printing this one was hell. It's got all of the colors that my printer hates. Gray, black, purple, yeah, cyan green. But it's still one of my favorites. It's got that highlight around the edge there that I kind of slopped off on the stream, but you know, it's got the texture on the nose, long sweeping strokes of the hair, and all that. Just gonna show like actual proper versions of the badges. And then in terms of shading, I know I said I would cover some shading. I have a basic cell shade somewhere. Here it is. This is a basic cell shade, so with no highlight. It's just got a lot of texture. A lot going on. Also, I really like this gold background. I thought this was really cool. Yeah, I thought the gold was really neat. Matched with the hazel eyes. And then this is not a completely full shade, but more of a full shade version of the same badge. A lot more highlight happening. A lot more, you know, airbrushing happening. Some blending going on. Yeah. It's not hard to go from a cell shade to like a full shade. To me, cell shading is like the first stage of a full shade, because then you just go back in with, you know, a blending tool or a blending brush, I guess, and just kind of, you know, soften your lines wherever you want the lines softer, and then you can add in some highlights. And that's basically a full shade. It's not too hard. I'd have to do a whole nother stream to really give a tutorial on that. Find another couple examples. And then we'll move over to expressions. This is a head-on badge. Head-ons are nice. You just have to make sure you get the expression right and you know how to shade it. This is a good example of hair. Yeah, symmetry. I also have an example of symmetry. I thought I had an example of symmetry. All my examples I thought I had, I can't find. Anyway, a good example of hair here. Good example of simple cell shading with the simple around the face and the highlights in the eyes and on the nose. And that sparkly background. I would have said, I think the only reason I did the text white is because I knew that my printer was going to print these colors darker than they look on the screen. So, normally this would have had to have been darker, because it just kind of blends into the background. But knowing my printer, I went ahead and made it lighter. Alright, before we move on to expressions, are there any more questions regarding badges that you want to ask? Please ask them now in the chat. I'm going to keep looking for examples. I have so many expression examples, but for some reason... Also, here's the physical print of that Brian badge. He looks really cool. You can see... Here, let me pull up the... It's a good way to show the difference between the colors on the screen and the colors on real life. So you can see here the color that his tongue and his face. You can see the difference, the color of his face versus the color of his face on the digital file. It's pretty different. You know, it changes a good bit. You got to be prepared. That is very purple. Here we go. And the green is a lot more yellow. I tend to lean more yellow than I do straight up lime green because it just won't print right. It'll print like a olive green.
Yeah. Clem Fox is asking, how did you do the outline?
How did I do the outline? Okay, so yeah, it depends on the program. My program is dumb and doesn't have things that would allow you to do an outline. Let me show you really quick. I copy. I don't like to learn new things, okay? I do it the hard way. I copy my lines, or maybe I collapse my lines onto my colors, whatever. Copy my line art. Paste my line art. I now have a separate layer with just a whole copy of my line art. Lock it. Make it black. Gaussian blur it to about, I don't know, 3. 1, 2, 3, and then just multiply and collapse the layer a bunch of times. I do it the hard way. I know that there is an easier way to do this. I don't care if there's an easier way to do it.
Can I teach them?
No, it's my stream. You can't teach them. Right. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead. I don't care.
So
that's how I do it right there.
Take the outline off so I can teach you at the same time.
The outline? The outline is off. Okay.
Alright. So what I do is I take all of the files for what you are trying to make an outline of and fuse them together.
See, that's a lot of work right there. That's already something that gives me anxiety.
Well, you do that, yeah, copy it, and then you Control Z, and then you have all of the layers, and then you can copy that, you can paste that layer that you just made. Anyway, you do that. You go to specifically in Metabang, you go to Select, and then there'll be Create Layer from Opacity, and then that will create a layer made only from what is on the screen. Yes,
but
you expand that with rounded edges, if you want.
Squint.
So, if you were to press it.
Let me try it. We're already 10 minutes into expressions, but I'll give it a shot. All right. So, I should only need.
While you're doing that,
Okay.
in Proto,
Select from layer opacity. Hang on, I gotta focus on this. This requires brain power.
Okay.
And then expand? How do I do that?
Alright, so now you go to Select again.
Select.
You'll have
Expand.
And then you put
by
it up
pixels.
like 20, and then
round corners.
Yep.
Stop being smarter than me.
It's just so
Don't like it. All right, well, you take the stream then.
Oh, no.
All right. Yeah, that's smarter than the way I do it. All right. Anyway, ignore that. No one saw that. Okay. Well, we're gonna do expressions now. Wait, did someone have a question?
Yes. Hind Proto?
Hind? I don't know. The guy that I just sent his badge that he ordered 2 months ago yesterday.
Yes. I missed the very beginning of the stream, but what's a good canvas size for badges?
That is an excellent question. Almost everything that I draw is on a 2000 by 2000 pixel screen. Some people think that's outrageously big. Some people,
DPI also matters.
yeah. What is my DPI?
If you're printing a badge, you want your DPI to be no less than 300.
Mine's at 350.
Yeah.
Yeah, 350 DPI, 2000 by 2000 pixel. That's what I've been using since I started, and
Some
it's
people will
fine.
say, like, oh, you can go to 150 DPI.
That sounds
I
wrong.
I like 300 DPI. You
Yeah.
get the best quality.
Alright.
Hey y'all, it's Dash. And I just wanted to say thank you for watching and supporting Furry Weekend at home. If you like this video, you're in luck because we're going to be posting more of them. So do yourself a favor by subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you know when we post brand new videos. And be sure to follow our socials linked in our description below, and I hope you catch us live the next time we're on Twitch at twitch.tv/furryweekend. Can't wait to see you there.